Hello everyone, welcome back. In the last lesson we talked about using methods, like methods of the math class, where you can send it something like a number and get the square root of that number back. So today we're going to talk about writing methods. And this is one of the more powerful things of Java or any programming language, is being able to take a block of code, write it, encapsulate it in a method, have a nice input and output, nice interface to that method, and then just have thousands of people use that method and never have to write that code again. So what we're going to learn about in writing methods is the header of the method, which is basically the beginning of the method, which describes kind of information about the method. And then in the body of code in the method there's this key new statement called the return statement, so I'll describe that. So the first method we'll just do on the board, and then we'll do like 6 or 7 small ones on the computer. So let's just start with the math function we covered last time. So let's say you always need to calculate, or many times you need to calculate x squared plus 1. So take a number, square it, and add 1 to it. So in math it looks like this. Function of x is x squared plus 1. If you were to write this in Java, this is the way you would do it. So the header, the method has a header, which is all this text, and then a block of code between curly braces. So our methods in this video at least are going to start with public and static. And I'm just going to explain this quickly but not expect you to understand. Public means that this method is visible to other classes besides this class. And static means this method should only be called at the class level, not the object level. But for now, just forget those two things. So next what happens is this is the data type that the method returns. So you have to specify in Java for a method what kind of data is returned by that method. So a double is returned by this method. Next comes the method name. I called this one F just to match this, but you usually have longer names. And then in parentheses are the inputs to the method, and these are called parameters in Java. So this function takes one input. So you just see one thing here. If there were multiple, you'd see commas. So you need the data type of the input and the name by which this input will be known in the code. Okay, so a parameter variable. So we're going to take in a double. We're going to call it x in the code, and that's the header. And then in between curly braces, believe it or not, goes the body of code. Now you can have lots of lines of code. I just have one line of code. And there's a new statement called the return statement. And what happens when Java sees a statement, it's followed by an expression. So it'll evaluate that expression, so x squared plus 1, and then take the value of that expression and send it back to whoever called it. So you would use this, that would be the output of this method. So 4 new things you learned. The return type of the method, the name of the method, the parameters, which include the type of parameter and the variable by which the parameter will be known in the code, and then the return statement. And that is how you send something back to your caller. So, let's, like I said, let's write 6 or 7 small methods to just so you get the hang of it on the computer. Okay?
Okay, let's start with the method we wrote on the board. So I'll just type it in: public, static, double. It returns a double. The method's called F. It takes a double as a parameter, which we'll call x, and then it returns x times x plus 1. Okay, so that's it really. So to use a method, you already know how to do. It's just like math.square root. So you can, in your main method, you can print out f of 3, let's say. You can put it in a variable. Answer equals f of 5. So the variable has to be double because what comes back from this method is a double. So you can put it in a variable. You can show that variable to the screen. So what should we see? We should see 10 and 26. Let's see. 10 and 26. Good. Okay, so everything's working. And then actually the last thing, which is really neat about BlueJ, is you can actually run that method directly. You may have noticed when I right-clicked, it usually just says main here. Now we have this second method. So you can just select that one. And then here, where you usually put it blank, this is actually where it wants your parameters. So you can type in 4, let's say, and you get back 17. Okay, so you can actually run these methods directly, which is really useful. So you actually don't need to write a main method if you're just writing these smaller methods. Okay, let's do a few more. So let's do a method that takes in a radius and returns the area of a circle. Okay, so there's the header, almost. So it returns a double. It's called area, and it takes in a double into the variable r. Now you don't have to do it in one line of code. See, this method just has that one line of code, the return statement. You can write, you know, whatever lines of code you want. So I can say double r squared equals r times r. Double pi equals 3.14. Double answer equals r squared times pi, return answer. Okay, so you can actually do all kinds of logic if you want. You can even call other methods within your method. What it wants, though, is for you to return have a return statement that returns the answer. So if I run this one, I'm going to run it directly. If I put in 10, I should get 314, which I do. Okay, so a method can have multiple lines of code. It just needs a return in the end. Next, we'll show a method that takes multiple inputs. So we're going to calculate the distance of a line by its 2 points. Public static double distance. Now this takes 4 parameters. So the way you do that is double x1. You just separate them by commas. Double y1, double x2, double y2. So it takes 4 points. Okay, you see? So each parameter you need the data type and then the name of the parameter, name of the variable, and that's it. So the other thing I'm going to teach you in this one is top-down design. So if you recall the answer, so let's say answer double answer, or result I'll call it. The result equals, it's the square root of the distance in x is squared plus the distance in y is squared. So if that seems like a lot to type, you can actually just do it mentally. You can say, well, I'm going to square 2x is different, and then I'm going to square 2y is different. So if you have a hard problem, you can just break it down in your head saying, okay, I'm going to square that, I'm going to square that, and then take the square root of it. Even though you don't actually have the method written for square, you can just, it's actually one of the beauties of programming. You can just say, okay, I'll do that later. So you can kind of delegate things to yourself later. As long as you mentally can put the program together in your head, then you can just do it like that. And then you can write this method separately. So you can say public static double square, and it takes 1, return x times x. Okay, so we broke that problem down. We wrote a helper method in a sense, and you can see these variables don't actually have to have the same names. They don't. The users of methods don't have to know anything about the name of the variable used inside the method. In fact, it's completely protected, so you can just do these as separate concepts. So let's see, area of a, when I do the distance formula. So I know this one. This is a Pythagorean triple. Should be 5, and it's 5. Okay, so that worked. So you can have multiple inputs in the method. Next one, multiple return statements. Okay, so let's do a method that returns the maximum of 2 numbers. So we're going to take in A and B, let's say. Give the method a name, max. So if A is greater than B, return A, else return B. Okay, so basically you don't have to have one return statement at the end, though some programmers like to do that. They find it easier to read. But I noticed on the AP Computer Science test they don't seem to care about that practice. So you can do multiple return statements throughout. So this one, basically you can return A if A is bigger, else you return B. Now Java's got to see something, so it really likes to see this else, so it knows you're at least returning something. Otherwise it will give you an error. So we're going to do max of 5 and 8. Should be 8. It is. Okay, and then lastly I'm going to show you a method that returns a different data type than it takes. So this method takes a grade, like a grade you got on the test, let's say you got an 88, and returns the letter grade that is. So public static, this returns a string. Grade double G. Okay, so the input is a double, but the output is a string, and that's perfectly fine to have a different one. So if G is greater equal to 90, this one I'm going to show you the coding style of having one return statement at the end. So what I'll do is, this is the way I usually do it. Forget this code for a sec. In the beginning, I'll define what I'm going to return. String result. I usually set it equal to something. Java likes that. And then return result at the end. And then you put your code in the middle. Okay, and here we're going to do if G is greater or equal to 90. Result equals A. Else if, and then there's a dot, and I have my code over here, so I'm just going to cut it in so you don't have to watch me type. But this stuff you already know, so don't feel bad about that. And then I like to auto layout all the time so I know what all the indenting is if I made any mistakes. Okay, so that should work too. No, it didn't like that. Oh, my cut and paste was different than my typing. Let's try that. Okay. Where is it? Grade. Okay, so what did I say? I got an 88. Should be a B. It is a B. Okay, so so I hope you got the hang of it. These are all very simple methods, but this is one of the beauties of programming, is that you can take some logic. Now imagine you have a program that has millions and millions of lines of code. So the way it gets organized is into methods, and each of these methods is probably 10 lines of code or something like that, and the methods use other methods, but they do something. There's something specific. You pass in an input, get back an output, and that is one of the building blocks of a huge program. So that's it. I'll go to the board and recap, and then we'll be done.
Okay, so to just recap, we wrote a bunch of different methods today, and we learned a bunch of actually very small things. So let me just go through those. So a method has a header, which basically describes how to interact with it, and then it has, in between curly braces, its code. So the header has a couple what's called modifiers. First is called the visibility modifier, public or private. This is whether this method can be seen outside of this class, and this will make more sense later when we have projects with multiple classes. Second modifier is something you either put static or you don't put anything, and that refers to something that you won't understand yet, but how do you call this method? Do you call it at the class level, or do you call it for each object or instance of the class? So static means it's called at the class level. Then next comes the return type. So this is a data type like int or double or boolean or string have been the ones we've discussed so far. So what does this method return? What type of data? The method name comes next. And then the list of parameters in parentheses. So each parameter separated by commas will have the data type of the parameter and then the variable name that whatever is passed should be put in for the body of the code. So it's how the code will refer to that parameter when it's passed. So that's in the header, and then in the code between the curly braces, it's just like code that you've been writing over the last 10 videos, with the exception of we have a new statement called the return statement, and after the word return is an expression. Java will evaluate that expression, take its result, and send it back to the person that called that method. So that's how you write a method. This is one of the most important and most powerful parts of a programming language, is to take code and bundle it up, have a nice clean interface, a nice clean input and output for that code, and then you get thousands and thousands of people use it. So that's it, and I'll talk to you soon.